And I would say there are two primary differences between a shamanic cosmology, which arises naturally out of psychedelic and entheogenic experiences and others, and the traditional worldview that we have, which is the worldview of materialist science. And I agree with Robert Anton Wilson, who said that, well, science actually doesn't believe that Newtonian Cartesian worldview anymore. But the problem is that we still do. I mean, most of us brought up having high school science and living in a world of material objects, in which material objects are regarded as the only real thing. So the one main difference between a shamanic view, worldview, cosmology, and this modernist worldview, which we're trying to get beyond, is that in the traditional view, there are many worlds. There's not just one level of reality, this material, physical, substantive level that you can touch and weigh, but there are many, equally real, not merely subjective, not merely fantasy, not merely mystical. And some scientists have tried to find ways to describe this multidimensionality in scientific language. Traditional shamanism, for example, says it's the upper world, middle world, and lower world. So you could say, it would be true to say, that the traditional shamanic animistic worldview is larger and more comprehensive, because it doesn't say that the material world is not real. It doesn't say the other worlds are more real. It says they're equally real. The other big difference between the traditional indigenous shamanic animistic worldview and the modern worldview is said that in these many worlds, including this material world, there are many beings besides human beings. Of course, we know animals and plants and so forth, we recognize them as beings. Traditional people recognize all beings as having a spiritual essence. That's called animism. Everything has a spiritual essence. Trees, mountains, rivers, animals, plants, places. They're called spirits. Not a symbol. See, from within a materialist worldview, including the worldview of modern psychology, including Jungian psychology, these beings are regarded as symbols, perhaps archetypal symbols, which is kind of more grand than ordinary symbols. But what does that really mean? Or it'll say it's part of the unconscious, or part of the collective unconscious. So let me give you a little story that illustrates the difference between shamanism and psychology. Little scenario. I'm a psychologist, I do psychotherapy. Supposing a person comes into the psychotherapist office and says, well, I had this dream about a bear. And the psychologist, if he's a Freudian, might say, well, that's probably father complex, and we'll work with that and analyze it. And if he goes to a Jungian might say, well, that's great mother, great mother bear, archetypal, like that. If it's a Gestalt therapist, he'd say, well, it's clearly a part of your mind, so let's do a Gestalt dialogue with it, put the bear on a chair, talk back and forth with it. It's a part of your mind. Always a part of your mind. Unconscious mind, maybe. Now, if you went to a shamanic practitioner, they might not say that. They might say, well, you had an encounter with bear, great bear, capital B, bear. The spirit of bear, the deity of bear. And if that's the case, the shamanic practitioner wouldn't say that certainly it would admit there are symbolic dreams and fantasies. But if it's a being and you treat it as a symbol, you could be in trouble, it would be considered disrespectful. If I meet you in the street and I treat you as a symbol or something in my mind, that's disrespectful, isn't it? You wouldn't like it, you'd be offended. Women are offended if they're treated as a symbol, as an object. It's called objectification. So part of shamanic practice is to learn to distinguish between the real beings that you might encounter in which you can have a real communication with, and those fantasies and imaginings that we ordinarily have, which we all have plenty of.